Welcome to the video. Today we're going to be discussing two of my favorite lenses for the Sony ZVE1. The first one is going to be the Sony 16-35 Power Zoom f4, and we're also going to be discussing the lens that I'm filming on, which is the Sony 20mm F1.8. Both G lenses. The 16-35 is the first lens that I bought, and the reason is I dealt with the Sony ZVE1, the standard one, for a really long time, and either I had to deal with a 24mm focal range, no stabilization or very trash stabilization, or good stabilization, but I swear it punches into about a 35mm range. So the second reason is the zoom range. Now, one thing about zoom range, I have become quite the enthusiast when it comes to cameras and equipment, just because I'm starting to do this YouTube channel full time and I'm really interested in gear that does not slow me down. If I could take one lens and have every single focal range covered, such as the 16, the 20, the 24, 28, 35, and even clear image zoom into a 70, of course, prime lenses with a larger aperture are nicer overall, just have more of a wow factor. But for my first lens, I did want to get one lens that kind of just ruled them all. Another note too, I didn't want to get an APS-C crop lens either, just because, for example, that 11mm f1.8 for APS-C, you can clear image zoom into about a 16mm, but you only really can go from 11 to a 22 with the full clear image zoom with this camera. This lens, however, you can go 35, and then 35 times 2, you can go 70. You could take this one lens and you could do a talking head, and then you could actually just also take that lens and do some different perspectives. So full frame glass, zoom lens, definitely my best first choice lens. So currently on the 16-35, I have the 20mm f1.8 right here. So we're punched into about 20, we're at an f4 just because that's as low as this lens can go. You see we still have a little bit of background blur, and this would be all the way wide. This is 16. I would not shoot a talking head because you got to get really close, it starts to distort your face. But if we punch into 20, this is about the same, or it's exactly the same of what we were looking at on the 20mm f1.8, and we actually were at f4 on the 20mm f1.8. Not sure if anyone could pick that out. However, the nice thing about this lens, you want to go out, shoot a vlog, boom, you know, I'm pretty much, the camera's right in my face and it still shows from my chest up. I'm still fitting in the frame. You want to take that lens and travel with you, and you want to do it to sit down talking head. Here's your 20mm. Let's go ahead and punch into the 24. Again, pay attention to the painting, the jackets, the blinds, the tripod, the little Dunder Mifflin Dundee over there, some of my books. How blurry are they? Let's punch again into 28, and this is one of the best things about this lens. You have all these different focal ranges, and when I first started using the zoom lens, I was doing a lot of that as I was filming, but now I realize that no, you pick a focal range and just stick to it and try not to touch that zoom rocker. What do you call it? Zoom ring, I guess you call it. Try not to zoom as you are filming. So now if I wanted to talk about something big and bulky, I have a lot more space. I probably have almost 2 feet in front of this lens and me, so I can get further back. However, I am just using a shotgun microphone, no crazy equipment here. Let's punch in all the way to 35, and now you can probably see, I feel like the narrower lenses make faces look fatter. It just looks weird. Anyway, this is nice if I want to have a lot of room. However, I always would prefer to sit a bit closer, and probably wouldn't want to go any tighter than a 28, and probably just keep it at 24. 24 is really one of those Goldilocks focal ranges that I've used. It's just wide enough for vlogging, but you also get a nice perspective, and then of course you can punch in. So if this was a 24mm prime, you can punch in to 48, 24, 36, 48, and we're back. So for this size too, this lens is actually also pretty lightweight. Compared to the old 16-35 f4, the Zeiss one, the one that's optically stabilized, I don't really have the weights of them, but I know that this lens is considerably lighter, and we can just forget about the 16-35 f2.8 G Master. That lens is probably like this big. It's just bigger, it's heavier, and all you're going is from f4 to f2.8. So this lens is nice and lightweight. It's going to be easier to carry with you. It's going to be easier to hold in your hand. It's just lighter, it's smaller, overall more compact, easier. The downsides of this lens. This lens is lighter, smaller, cheaper when compared to the G Master lenses, but those lenses are big and heavy. And for someone that's coming from a camera that's super small, super lightweight, and just literally just fits in one of your pockets, well, maybe not with this little cage on it, this lens is still pretty big and bulky. I mean, you saw it before, it's pretty much, this is the dimension, the 20mm and the 16-35, they're pretty much about the same. This is pretty big, you know, compared to the iPhone. Look, that's how big the modern smartphone is. So this is not a pancake lens. This is a pretty. People say this is compact. However, this is still a pretty big lens for what it is. I think a lot of that bulk comes from the zoom range, and the zoom range is nice, but I would prefer to have that big bulk for a brighter aperture, or rather than have that 16-35 focal range, which is probably the reason why I bought the 20mm F1.8, because that's pretty much perfect for everything. And this lens, the bulk of this lens, is due to it goes all the way open to f1.8 rather than f4. However, this lens still may be the best first choice for people that are just getting into the hobby. Maybe you're just thinking about getting your first full frame mirrorless camera. This lens, don't sleep on this lens. We got to also talk about the f4. That's the elephant in the room. My opinion, f4 is totally fine. I will do some low light tests on this lens and with the f1.8 aperture lens as well. But the main thing is the lower the aperture goes, the blurrier the background goes. So this is as blurry as we can go. Of course, if you punch in, that background gets blurry, but now you're starting to cut your head off. So 28, you know, you do get blurrier, as right here, if you're in a small room, you're not really going to get much of a blurry background with that wider lens. So let's go back up to 24. We were at 28 before, but let's go to 24. One trick that you can do, so again, this is a 10 by 20 room. Let me show you what you can do. You can actually put some distance behind you. We're at f4, and I don't have anything to put this on. You could put some distance behind you, and now you could see the fan, the shirts, the light up there. You do get some background blur, and this is 16 super wide. Let's go back up to 20. So if you are traveling with this lens and you do want to get that background blur, which is bokeh, just make sure you put some distance behind you. I don't really have much but a door and just a couple things, a lamp, a fan that's on, that orange inside jacket. So that's one thing you can do to get around the f4 aperture if you really want that super blurry background. With the f4 compared to the f1.8 or 2.8, you do get worse low light performance. However, with the Sony ZVE1, this is the same sensor as the A7S III, FX3, FX6, and so on and so forth. The 12 megapixel sensor that goes all the way up to ISO 409,000. So probably not going to be as much of an issue if you have a full frame camera, especially a modern full frame camera. Maybe if you have the older A7 III or the A7C. I'm not really too sure into cameras. I just know the A7S III sensor, which is in this particular camera, is the best in low light. So if you have the you want to get an f4 lens and you've got the A7S III, or you just picked up the Sony ZVE1, I think you'll be fine. We will do some tests, but those are just my methods that I would use to get around that f4 aperture that's not as bright as the f2.8 or 1.8. So that's the 16-35 f4. Now we're going to talk about probably the more exciting lens, the 20mm f1.8 G lens. This is the second lens that I bought, and this is the lens, I will be honest, I was much more excited when I first got this lens. That excitement's kind of wore off. I haven't done much testing. I haven't taken this out and filmed a vlog where I'm actually holding the camera in front of my face like that. I'll have to see if the 20mm is actually good enough. It seems like the 20mm focal range doesn't have a lot of distortion. So again, my issue with the 24mm is 24mm is nice, but it's just too wide. You really have to hold it almost all the way out here, whereas a 20mm, not as wide as a 16mm, however, still wide enough that you can hold it pretty evenly in front of your face. And with the Sony ZVE1, you do get, this is about a 20 to 40mm lens, and f1.8 f3.6, because that clear image zoom is going to punch in from 20, then 1.5 is going to punch into 30, and then times 2 is going to punch into 40. So you do get some reach with this lens. Again, because it's the clear image zoom, you're not getting the same aperture as if you know, it doesn't matter if you're at a 30 or 20 or whatever, you're always at a constant f4 on this particular 16-35 lens. However, this lens, much more exciting. You do get much better low light. So if you've got one of those older full frame cameras for Sony, This lens is probably going to do good if you're in extreme low light. I'm talking walking on a dark street, walking in a dark park after dark, or if you're in New York like I am, you want to film some subway footage. It's usually, you need that low light performance from either your camera. Any little bit of extra horsepower from a lens like this, definitely good. The F1.8, probably the most exciting thing about this lens, and 20mm is just that little bit wider for vlogging and just for all-purpose lens. And this one's probably just the best overall prime lens. Enough talk, let's put this on, see how it looks. Right, we are on the 20mm F1.8. Here's the 16 to 35. Now we are at F4. Let's go down to 3.5. This is a F2.8 lens right now. We're at 20mm. Now we're wide open. We're at F1.8. Now pay attention to that background blur, the jacket. There is no question, if you really want to sit in a small room, that's where you need that larger aperture, that open wide aperture. The way apertures work is the lower the number, the faster, the brighter, the wider, the more light it lets in. So that's one thing that this does. You can, and with the 20mm focal range, you could get pretty close, and the closer you get, the more blurry it gets. But you can still sit further back, and then you still get, like, look at that picture. Let's say my indoor studio was a mess over there. I just wanted to show up here that then this is where this lens really excels. It's wide. I think it's considered ultra wide, 20mm, and that aperture is really nice. So the downside of this lens, if you care about this thing, this camera comes with that dynamic active stabilization. It's about a 30% crop. So with this, you'd be stuck probably at, I don't know, 1.3, 1.4. You'd be stuck here. You wouldn't be able to punch in anymore. You'd be stuck at a 26mm, which actually is pretty decent. 24mm actually is pretty good. Probably one of my favorite focal ranges that does everything. When you use that dynamic active, it does punch in to the point where you're at a 26mm, which now you're pretty much right back to that 24. You have those same issues where you got to hold it all the way out there. And then you also lose the ability to clear image zoom any further in. You can't use dynamic active and clear image zoom at the same time. That's not an issue for me. I don't need perfection when it comes to the super stable footage. I've always thought that with the active stabilization on the standard Sony ZVE1 that came out in the year 2020, I thought that was fine. Yes, if you're moving the camera around really fast, you do get micro jitters here and there. It's like, it'll just kind of shift around like that, and it's weird. The image just looks a little bit weird. However, for the most part, I was pretty satisfied. I thought it was pretty decent, and I don't know, a lot of people just didn't like it. I never had a problem with that. This does have slightly better active stabilization than this camera. That's good enough for me. I don't need to worry about punching into the dynamic active. I know a lot of people like that. Look, if you're doing some cool, like, the dynamic active stabilization of this camera is good because you don't need a gimbal. You can just do, like, you don't have to be as careful if you're doing certain shots, but I would not use that with this camera all the time. Active stabilization is good for me. It's not as big of a crop, and you still get that ×2 clear image zoom. Also, only shoot in 1080p, but that's a different discussion. You only get a 1.5 clear image zoom on this camera if you're filming in 4K, but you get a ×2 clear image zoom if you're shooting in 1080p. So zoom range, of course, we know that it's only a 20 to 40, whereas something like the 16 to 35, if you take into account with one of the newer cameras, the clear image zoom, you're looking at, you can go as wide as 16 if you just go down to standard stabilization. With that 35mm maximum focal range, ×2, you can go 70, so you essentially got a 16mm to 70mm reach on this lens. Makes this lens very, very versatile. Here you've only got a 20 to 40. You can't even punch into that 50mm. So if that matters to you, for me, I mean, I've got both of these lenses. I don't know which one I'll like first. I have to do more testing out in the field. Another thing is this lens, while it's wide, it's not as wide as a 16-35G that I have, or it's not as wide as that 14mm Sony G Master. So do have to hold it a little bit further away, whereas the 16-35 with the 16mm you can really hold it in your face. This lens is much better, and this lens is also a bit lighter, so with holding it closer to your face and it being lighter, this is probably going to be a little bit easier to just carry around in your backpack every day, and it's also going to be easier if you really want to point the camera at you and talk for like 10 or 15 minutes. Another note about the super bright aperture on this lens, if you have a lot of distance in the back, for some reason, this is just me, I particularly don't like when it's super blurry. I think that f3.5 is fine. I would not want to go down to past f2.8 during the day. If sun is shining, usually you have a lot of distance in the back. And usually I want to show where I am. I don't want to just totally obliterate out the background and just blur everything out and then all focus is on me. These lenses do have the aperture ring, so you can change it pretty fast. It's one of the nice things about the Sony G lenses. But that's one thing. The 2.5 and the 2.8, you can really still get a pretty decently blurry background. This would be the f4, so still a bit blurry, but of course, crank it wide open to f1.8, super blurry. Now it looks very cinematic. Now I particularly don't want to use the ND filters just because it's just one more thing, and like I said, I'm not looking for the equipment to slow me down. I would rather just turn it up to f4, and then you don't have to worry about that ND filter, putting it on, taking it off. Especially when you're outside, you may be in a super bright condition, and then for me, I may go down to the subway and now you can't open it all the way up. Your low light's going to suffer. So I'd rather just deal with not having the neutral density filter and just have, I put these little filters on there just so that the lens doesn't get scratched. And again, that way if I happen to forget one of the lens caps, I'd rather have this thing get scratched than the actual lens. It's all about just not letting the equipment slow me down. So I do have to turn this aperture all the way up or down, or whatever you say, to at least f2.8, if not 3.2, 3.5, or f4. F4 I think is fine if you, like I said, if you've got a lot of distance and a lot of trees in the background, you're still going to get that blurry background, but it's also not going to be so bright that everything's going to be super bright and too much light getting in the lens. So that's one thing. The f1.8 is useful in small areas, but I don't find it really that appeasing if you're walking around outside and everything behind you is just super blurred out. Just doesn't look as natural. Cinematic, yes, but not as natural. I'm probably not going to go down to 1.8 all the time when I'm walking around outside. That's the 20mm f1.8. Now, a third lens that I was going to buy, but I'm still not sure about, it's this really small 24mm f2.8. So again, here's the f2.8. This is about as wide as we would be able to go, and then a 24mm probably be about that. So this is what we would be looking at for the f2.8 24mm ultra compact. I mean, I'm talking this lens is like tiny. This lens is like, that's it. It's about half the size of this. Not really sure if I'm going to get that. It is something that I've actually looked at just because, again, that 24mm, because that lens is so small, it's going to make this camera, the ZVE1, fit almost in a pocket of a winter jacket. Again, it's going to transform this camera into a much more compact camera, much more lightweight. The one caveat with that lens would be, since it's just a 24 and we would be using it to vlog because it's so lightweight, you're going to have to pretty much hold it almost all the way out like this. Maybe you can get away with this, but again, like that's very uncomfortable on the elbow. I'll have to think about that. If it fits in the budget, maybe I'll try it out. I definitely think that it could be a good lens to just throw in your bag if you're traveling around. And if you don't need that f1.8 and you don't really need that super wide lens, then hey, maybe it would fit along this lens. So if you have the 16-35 f4 and the 24 f2.8, maybe that's all you need. It really just depends. Again, for me, if I need two ultra wides, a 16 and the 20, and if I actually need that f1.8 versus that f2.8, it's not going to make a difference to me. We'll have to see. The most important thing is give it a shot, give these lenses a shot. For beginners or people that are looking to actually step up their video game on YouTube or really anything, I think the 16-35 is probably going to suffice most people. If you really want to get into more low light and maybe you've got an A7 III or an A7 IV or an A7 C, then maybe the 20mm f1.8 is going to fit you better. Even that 24mm f2.8 is probably better. However, this lens is nice. The 20mm f1.8 is definitely the most exciting lens. This one's the most practical. We're not going to mention APS-C lenses. Another video for another time. So, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next one. Everyone take care. Have a great one. Bye.